The blanket arrived at 4:47 a.m. No note. No name. No knock. Just soft yellow cotton folded on the marble threshold of a man who had spent 12 years telling himself he had no regrets. Ethan Caldwell picked it up with one hand, his coffee going cold in the other. He didn't recognize the fabric. But something in his chest recognized it before his mind ever could. Why? Before we begin, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And if you're new to the channel, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. Ethan didn't find the blanket himself. His assistant, Dara, found it at 6:15 that morning when she arrived to open the gate. She almost stepped over it. Almost. But something about the way it was folded stopped her, too careful, too deliberate, like whoever left it had taken a moment to get it right. She brought it to Ethan without touching it more than she had to. He was already at his desk by then, working through overnight emails the way he always did. First meeting at 8. Conference call at 9. The kind of morning that didn't leave room for anything unscheduled. Dara set it on the edge of his desk and said, "This was at the gate. Someone left it overnight." Ethan looked at it for a moment without picking it up. Yellow cotton. Soft. Old. The kind of thing you'd find folded in a drawer somewhere, kept for a reason nobody could quite explain anymore. "Camera," he said. Dara pulled up the security footage on her tablet and set it in front of him. The timestamp read 3:52 a.m. A woman in a gray coat walked up to the gate, bent down, placed the blanket on the ground, and walked away. 11 seconds. Face turned just enough away from the camera that it caught nothing useful. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look back. She moved like someone who had made the decision long before she arrived. The footage ended. The woman was gone. Ethan watched it twice. Then he picked up the blanket. The moment the fabric was in his hands, something hit him that he wasn't expecting. A smell. Faint. Floral. Old. Not a perfume he could name, more like the memory of one. Something that existed somewhere in the back of his mind in a place he didn't go often. He stood very still. He turned the blanket over slowly, looking at it the way you look at something you're not sure you recognize. And then, in the bottom corner, he found it. Small. Embroidered carefully in pale thread. Not a name. Not a date. Just one letter. C. He stared at it longer than made sense. "Do you want me to call security?" Dara asked from the doorway. "I'll do it," he said. "Thank you." She left. Ethan didn't move. He was still holding the blanket when Helena came downstairs. She appeared at the top of the staircase in her robe, hair loose, the way she always looked before her first coffee. She glanced at the desk. At him. At what was in his hands. And then something crossed her face that Ethan almost missed. It wasn't confusion. Confusion would have been normal. Confusion would have been, "What is that?" Or "Where did that come from?" What crossed Helena's face was different. It was faster than confusion. Quieter. Something that looked almost like recognition, and then, just as quickly, it was gone. Replaced by the expression she always wore. Calm. Composed. Unreadable. "What is that?" she asked, descending the stairs. "Don't know yet," Ethan said. His voice came out even. He was grateful for that. "Someone left it at the gate," he added. "I'm going to look into it." Helena nodded once and walked toward the kitchen. She didn't ask to see it. She didn't ask any of the questions a person normally asks. She just walked away. Ethan watched her go. Then he called his head of security, a man named Reed who had worked for the Caldwell family for 9 years and did not rattle easily. Ethan kept the call short. "Find the woman in the gray coat. Find the car she left in. No details, no theories, just find her." He hung up. His hand was shaking. Just slightly. Not enough for anyone to notice. But he noticed. He set the blanket down on the desk and looked at it. The embroidered C in the corner. The smell that wouldn't quite leave him. He tried to place it and couldn't. He tried to move on to the 8 o'clock meeting and found he couldn't do that either. He was still standing there when Lily appeared. She was 7 years old and had her mother's ability to enter a room without making any noise. She walked in wearing her school clothes already. She always dressed herself before breakfast, had since she was 5, and she stopped when she saw the blanket on the desk. She walked over to it without asking and picked it up. Ethan watched her hold it. She pressed it briefly against her face the way small children do with soft things. Then she lowered it and looked up at him. "It smells like someone sad," she said. She set it back down on the desk, turned around, and walked out of the room toward the kitchen. Ethan didn't speak. He couldn't think of a single thing to say. The house was quiet again. Just him and the blanket and the sea in the corner and the smell he couldn't name and the look on Helena's face that had lasted less than 2 seconds but had somehow not left him since. He picked the blanket up one more time. He thought about putting it in the trash. A stranger left something at his gate, that happened. It probably meant nothing. The easiest thing in the world would be to hand it to Dara and forget it existed. He didn't do that. He folded it carefully and set it in the drawer of his desk. He didn't ask himself why. He just did it. 20 minutes later, Reed called back. "We pulled the best frame we could get from the camera," Reed said. "The woman's face is still no good. But we got the car. And the plate." A pause. "Mr. Caldwell, have you ever seen this plate before?" Reed sent the image to Ethan's phone. Ethan looked at it. Something moved through him. Not recognition exactly. Not certainty. Something quieter and stranger than both of those things. The feeling you get when you're trying to remember a dream, when you know something was there, just beyond reach, and the harder you grab for it the further it goes. He had seen that plate before. He just could not remember where. If that ending left you with more questions than answers, that's exactly where this story wants you. Share your first theory in the comments. And if emotional mystery stories are your thing, subscribe and stay close, this one is only just beginning. Ethan didn't sleep. He told himself it was work. He had a term sheet due by noon, 2 board members who wouldn't stop emailing, and a development deal in Singapore that was 3 weeks behind. There was always a reason to stay at his desk until 2 in the morning. There had been for as long as he could remember. But tonight, the drawer was the problem. He kept looking at it. The closed drawer on the left side of his desk where he'd put the blanket that morning. He didn't open it. He just kept looking at it the way you look at something you're not ready to deal with yet. He pulled up the security report instead. Reed had sent it over at noon, clean, professional, thorough. The woman in the gray coat. 11 seconds of footage. Face obscured. But the plate was there, traced and verified. The vehicle was a leased sedan. Leased 18 months ago by a woman named Claire Ashford. Ethan read the name twice. Nothing. No recognition. No pull. The name sat there on the page the way a stranger's name does, meaningless, flat. He kept reading. Claire Ashford, mid-30s, a registered nurse, a coastal address 3 hours from the city. The file photo was standard, pulled from a professional database, a little blurry, the kind of image that gives you a shape but not a face. He stared at it longer than he should have. He couldn't have said why. He set the file down and leaned back in his chair, and that's when it came, the way it always came when he was tired enough to stop blocking it. Not a full memory. Just a moment. A single image. Kara, standing in the doorway of his old office. The one he'd had before the company became what it was. She was holding 2 coffees and she was laughing at something, he couldn't remember what, and she looked so completely at ease in his world that he'd never once stopped to ask whether she wanted to be there. He hadn't asked her much of anything, in the end. She had come to him on a Tuesday. He remembered that specifically, a Tuesday in October, 12 years ago, when everything he was building felt like it was one bad week away from collapsing. She had been calm. She had laid it out simply, the way she did everything. "I need to know if I'm a part of your life or just a part of your schedule." He had said things. He'd said good things, probably, he was always good with words when the pressure was on. But she had watched his face and heard something he hadn't said out loud. She left 3 days later. No call. No letter. Just gone. He had told himself she would come around. Then he told himself she'd made her choice. Then he stopped thinking about it entirely, because the company needed him and grief was a luxury he hadn't budgeted for. 2 years later, he met Helena at a conference in London. She was elegant and direct and she understood his world without needing it explained to her. They made sense together the way 2 very organized things make sense when placed side by side. The wedding was photographed beautifully. The marriage worked. It worked the way a good contract works, respected, maintained, functional. Helena was never cold to him. He was never cruel to her. They had Lily, who was the best thing either of them had done. In the photographs, they looked exactly like what people wanted a successful couple to look like. Ethan was good at photographs. He picked up his phone and found Marcus's number. He hadn't called it in over a year. He dialed before he could talk himself out of it. Voicemail. 2 rings and straight to voicemail. Marcus's voice, brief and professional, "Leave a message." Ethan sat with the beep for a second. "It's Ethan," he said finally. I have a question. Call me back." He hung up. Marcus hadn't answered his calls in 6 years. Ethan didn't know exactly when the silence had started, it had been gradual, the way those things are. Fewer replies, longer gaps, then nothing. He'd told himself it was distance, busy lives, the natural drift that happens between people after a company splits apart. He had mostly believed that. He put the phone face down on the desk. The house was quiet. Helena had gone to bed at 10:30 as she always did. Downstairs, nothing moved. He should have gone to sleep an hour ago. He heard the small footsteps before he saw her. Lily appeared in the doorway of his study in her pajamas, her hair loose, holding something yellow against her chest. The blanket. She had gotten into his desk drawer. He hadn't even heard her come downstairs. Lily. He kept his voice gentle. What are you doing up? I couldn't sleep, she said. Then, without any self-consciousness at all, can I keep this? He looked at the blanket in her arms. Where did you find that? Your drawer. She wasn't apologetic about it. It belongs in my room. I don't know why. It just does. Ethan crossed the room and crouched down in front of her. He took the blanket from her carefully, the way you take something from a child when you don't want them to feel it being taken. She let go without a fight but watched his face the entire time. It's not ours to keep, he said. She considered that. Whose is it? I don't know yet. She looked at him for a moment longer, that particular look she had, the one that always made him feel like she was reading something he hadn't written yet, and then she turned and went back upstairs without another word. He stood in the hallway listening to her footsteps fade. It belongs in my room. He went back to his desk. He sat down. He held the blanket in his hands for the third time that day, and this time he went slowly, corner to corner, hem to hem, his fingers checking the fabric the way you check something when you're not sure what you're looking for. And then he found it. Tucked inside the hem. Folded twice, small enough to disappear if you weren't looking. A photograph barely the size of his thumb. He unfolded it carefully. 2 people. Standing close. The background looked like a hotel lobby, warm lighting, marble floors. One of them was him. Younger. Before everything. The other person's face had been cut away. Cleanly, deliberately. Scissors, not tearing. Someone had made a decision about what he was and wasn't allowed to see. He sat there in the quiet of his house, holding a photograph of himself standing next to someone whose face had been removed, and the only sound in the room was the clock on the wall counting out the seconds while his mind went absolutely nowhere useful at all. If that photograph is keeping you up the way it's keeping Ethan up, you're exactly where this story wants you. Tell us your theory in the comments. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're there when the next piece of this unfolds. Ethan made the call at 7 in the morning, before Helena came downstairs, before Dara arrived, before the house made any of its usual sounds. He didn't call Reed. Reed worked for Caldwell Holdings. Whatever Reed found, it went into a system. Into a file. Into a record that other people could access. He called Victor Hale instead, a private investigator he'd used once, 3 years ago, for a due diligence matter he hadn't wanted touching the company. Victor was quiet, careful, and completely separate from Ethan's world. That was exactly what Ethan needed right now. He gave Victor one name. Claire Ashford. The coastal address from Reed's report. How deep? Victor asked. Ethan looked at the closed drawer where the blanket was. The tiny photograph was inside his jacket pocket. He hadn't put it back. Deep enough, he said. He hung up before he could change his mind. Then he sat with the decision for a moment, the specific discomfort of having just done something he couldn't undo. He had chosen to keep this separate. Private. Hidden from the people around him. He told himself it was just being careful. He almost believed it. Victor called back the following afternoon with his first report. Claire Ashford. 34 years old. Registered nurse, or she had been, until 14 days ago when she resigned her position without notice. No explanation on file. No new job lined up. Her supervisor had described her as reliable, private, and professional. The kind of employee nobody worries about until they're suddenly gone. No criminal record. No lawsuits. No bankruptcy. No visible connection to Ethan Caldwell, Caldwell Holdings, or anyone in his orbit. On paper, she was nobody. A quiet life in a small coastal city, built carefully, maintained quietly. But then Victor pulled her address history. 4 moves in 8 years. And each one smaller than the last, fewer rooms, smaller towns, further from major cities. Not the pattern of someone building a life. The pattern of someone reducing one. Shrinking down. Making themselves harder to find. Or harder to reach. She's not running from something recent, Victor said. This started a long time ago. Whatever she's avoiding, she's been avoiding it for years. Ethan said nothing. He was thinking about the blanket. About a woman who had driven 3 hours in the middle of the night to leave something at a gate and then disappeared in 11 seconds. Someone who knew how to be invisible didn't do that by accident. Which meant she had chosen to be seen. Just once. Just enough. That evening, after the house settled, Ethan took the photograph out of his pocket. He had looked at it a dozen times in the past 2 days. Always the same 2 things, his own younger face, and the clean edge where someone else's had been removed. But tonight he looked past himself. He looked at the background. Warm lighting. High ceilings. Marble floors with a specific dark vein pattern running through them. He knew that floor. It came to him quietly, without drama, the way true recognition works. Not a shock. Just a door opening in the back of his mind. The Halloran Grand. A hotel in the city, the kind with a lobby that looked like an old European palace. He had stayed there once in his life. 1 week, 12 years ago, during the worst stretch of that acquisition, the one that nearly broke him before it made him. Kara had stayed there too. She had been in the city that week, visiting her father. They'd had dinner in that lobby restaurant 3 nights in a row because neither of them had wanted to be anywhere else. He set the photograph down. He picked it up again. He was still sitting there when he heard footsteps in the hallway. Helena appeared in the doorway. She was dressed for bed, reading glasses pushed up on her head, a glass of water in her hand. She looked at him. Then her gaze moved, just briefly, to his hand. He closed his fingers around the photograph before she could see it clearly. It was a small movement. Natural, almost. The kind of thing you might not notice. Helena noticed. She stood in the doorway for a moment without speaking. Her expression didn't change, it stayed exactly where it was, which was its own kind of answer. Then she said, "Don't stay up too late," and walked away. No question about what he was holding. No question about why he had closed his hand. Just those 5 words and then the sound of her footsteps going back down the hall. Ethan sat in the silence she left behind. Don't stay up too late. Like everything was normal. Like he was just a husband who stayed at his desk too long, which he was, which he had always been, and she had learned not to push. Or she already knew what he was holding. He didn't let himself finish that thought. Victor called at 9:15. "There's one more thing," Victor said. He didn't lead with it, he said it the way people say things they're not sure you're ready for. "Claire Ashford has a child." Ethan said nothing. School enrollment records. 1 child listed under her guardianship. "Age," Ethan said. 11. The word landed and sat there. Ethan didn't move. He didn't speak. The number turned itself over in his mind once, twice, and the math happened before he could stop it, the way math always happens when you're not trying to do it. 11 years old. 12 years since Kara left. Maybe. Could it be? Is it possible? He kept his voice level. "Name?" Victor paused. That pause was its own clue. "That's the thing," Victor said. "The child's name on the enrollment record is withheld by guardian request. It's not unusual, schools allow it in certain circumstances. But someone went through the process specifically to make sure that name doesn't appear anywhere public." Ethan stared at the wall in front of him. A woman who had spent 8 years making herself smaller. Who had resigned her job 2 weeks ago and then driven 3 hours in the dark to leave a blanket at his door. Who had a child, 11 years old, whose name someone had deliberately made invisible. The timing was exact. The secrecy was exact. Everything about this had been exact. And the child's name was nowhere. Like someone had decided, a long time ago, that it was safer that way. The math is exact, the name is gone, and somewhere 3 hours away, a woman is waiting to see what Ethan does next. If you have a theory, drop it in the comments, we read every single one. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what Victor finds next. Victor's second report arrived at 6 a.m. as a single document with no summary, no interpretation, no softening. Just facts, in order, the way Ethan had asked for them. He read it standing up. He didn't sit down for a long time after. Claire Ashford had no social media. That alone wasn't unusual. But she also had no credit history before 13 years ago. No cards, no loans, no accounts, no rental agreements, no utility bills, nothing that placed her anywhere in the world before a specific date in autumn, 13 years back. Before that date, Claire Ashford didn't exist. After it, she had a full life. Nursing license, apartment lease, bank account, medical records. Everything in order. Everything real. But it all started from the same point, like a clock someone had switched on and then walked away from. Victor had written 4 words at the bottom of the page, "This was professionally done." Ethan set the document down on his desk. Professional meant expensive. Expensive meant someone with resources had built this woman a new life from scratch. Not a criminal. Not a witness protection situation, those left different traces. This was private. Personal. Someone with money had decided Claire Ashford needed to begin again. And they had made sure she could. Ethan had tried Marcus twice more since that first voicemail. Both times, 2 rings, then nothing. He called a mutual contact, a lawyer named Jerry who had worked with both of them in the early years and still moved in the same circles as Marcus. He kept it casual. Just trying to reach him. You know how he is with phones. Jerry passed the message. Marcus called back that same afternoon. He didn't say hello. He said, "You need to stop looking." Ethan had been ready for anger. For denial. for the cold professionalism Marcus had always used when he wanted to end a conversation. He wasn't ready for what he actually heard, which was something quieter and much worse. Marcus sounded afraid. "Some things were done to protect you," Marcus said. "That's all I can tell you." "Protect me from what?" Silence. "Marcus. Stop looking, Ethan." His voice had dropped. "Please." The line went dead. Ethan sat there with the phone in his hand. "To protect you. Not to protect her. Not to protect the company. You. Singular. Personal." Marcus had been his closest partner for 4 years. The person who knew every version of Ethan before the money, before the image, before the careful life. The person who had also known Kara. And now he was afraid enough to say please. Dinner that night was quiet in the normal way, Lily chattering about something that happened at school, Helena asking the right follow-up questions, Ethan managing to respond at the right moments without fully being present. A functional meal. The kind they were good at. Then Helena's phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it once, then pushed her chair back. "I'll just be a minute," she said, and stepped through the glass doors to the garden. Ethan watched her through the glass. He watched her face change. It was subtle, Helena was always subtle, but he had spent 9 years watching this woman across dinner tables and boardroom tables, and he knew every expression she owned. What crossed her face now was not one of them. It was something tighter. More controlled. The kind of expression you produce when you're working hard not to produce one at all. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. She came back to the table, picked up her fork, and said, "My sister. She's been having a hard week." Ethan nodded. He said nothing. Helena's sister had died 4 years ago. A small, quiet funeral. Ethan had held Helena's hand through the entire service. He remembered it clearly because it was one of the few moments in their marriage where she had let him. He picked up his fork and kept eating. Lily was telling a story about a butterfly she had seen at recess. He listened to it. He laughed at the right part. He passed the bread when Helena reached for it. And underneath all of it, something that had been uncertain was becoming something else. Victor sent the photograph at 8 that evening. A grocery store parking lot, daytime. Claire Ashford walking toward a car, one bag in each hand, face caught in 3/4 profile. Clear enough to study. She didn't look like Kara. Different hair, different posture, different weight to her face. Ethan had looked at Kara's face in his memory enough times over the past week that he was confident of that. These were not the same person at first glance. But something else. The way she held the bags, one slightly higher than the other, the left shoulder dipped. A small habit. The kind of thing you do the same way every time without knowing you do it. He had seen that before, in someone, somewhere. Not recently. Far back. He couldn't place it. He didn't try to force it. He just sat with the feeling that she moved like someone who used to be someone else. He was still staring at the photograph when Lily appeared beside him. She did that, materialized without warning, had since she was small, some inherited talent for silence that he had never fully gotten used to. "Daddy," she said, "do you have a secret?" He turned the phone face down. "No." "Why?" She thought about this seriously, the way she thought about most things. "Because you make the same face Mama makes. When people have secrets they go somewhere else in their head and their face just stays here." Ethan looked at her. "I'm right here." "I know," she said. She picked up her crayon. "Mama has one too. I can tell. Her secrets make her quiet." She went back to her drawing without looking up. "Yours make you look scared." He didn't answer that. He sat with it instead, a 7-year-old who had quietly noticed everything, named it without any idea what it meant, and gone back to her drawing like she hadn't just taken something apart. Victor called at 9:45. "I found the child," he said. "It's a boy. 11 years old." Ethan said nothing. He already knew a boy. Already knew 11. He waited. "The school emergency contact form," Victor continued. "One name. Not Claire Ashford's, she's the primary guardian. The emergency contact is someone else." "Who?" Victor said the name. Ethan heard it the way you hear something that rearranges the room around you without moving anything. Marcus Webb. His former business partner. The man who hadn't spoken to him in 6 years. The man who had called him that afternoon sounding frightened, and said some things were done to protect you, and hung up before Ethan could ask the only question that mattered. Marcus was listed as the emergency contact for a child who might be Ethan's son. And he had told Ethan to stop looking. To protect him. From what? Marcus knew. Helena lied. And somewhere 3 hours away, a boy has a name that no one will say out loud. If that has your mind racing, drop your theory in the comments, you might be closer than you think. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you're there when the truth starts coming apart. Marcus chose a coffee shop 40 minutes outside the city. Neutral ground. The kind of place with no one who would recognize either of them. He was already there when Ethan arrived. Sitting in the corner, both hands around a cup he wasn't drinking from. Ethan hadn't seen him in person in over 2 years, not since a chance encounter at an industry event where they had shaken hands and said nothing real to each other and moved on in under 4 minutes. Marcus looked older than that. Not in years. In something else. The kind of tired that doesn't come from bad sleep. Ethan sat down across from him and didn't say anything. He had learned a long time ago that silence was more useful than questions when someone was already carrying something heavy. Marcus set down his cup. Kara was pregnant when she left, he said. Ethan went still. The child isn't yours. Marcus said it quickly, cleanly, like he'd rehearsed getting through those words without stopping. After you chose the company, after she walked away from that conversation, we spent some time together. She and I. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something either of us intended. He paused. The boy is mine. The coffee shop hummed around them. Someone laughed at another table. A machine whirred behind the counter. Ethan sat with it. Turned it over. Felt the shape of it. Then why disappear, he said. Why a new identity? Why all of this? Marcus looked at his hands. Your father found out she was pregnant. He didn't know whose child it was, he assumed yours. He made it clear that if she stayed, if she said anything, if she made any kind of claim on you or the company, he would destroy her family. Her father's business. Everything they had. He met Ethan's eyes. She believed him. She had good reason to. The silence that followed had weight to it. Ethan heard it all. And piece by piece, like a lock turning, everything fell into place. The blanket. The hidden identity. The emergency contact. The photograph with the face cut away. The silence Marcus had kept for 6 years. The fear in his voice on the phone. It all fit. Cleanly. Completely. He felt something that was almost relief, and underneath it, a grief he hadn't expected. Not for himself. For Kara. For a woman who had been threatened out of her own life by a man Ethan had trusted unconditionally. He called his father from the car before he'd even left the parking lot. His father answered on the second ring. 71 years old, still sharp, still steady. The voice of a man who had built things and protected them and never spent much time on regret. Ethan didn't lay it out carefully. He said what Marcus had told him. Directly. All of it. His father listened. When Ethan finished, there was a pause. Then his father said, "You had everything to lose that year. Everything. Someone had to make sure you didn't lose it." Not a denial. Not quite a confession. The kind of answer that a man gives when he believes what he did was right and has no interest in defending it any further. Ethan hung up. He sat in the parking lot for a long time. His father had threatened a pregnant woman to protect a company. Had decided Ethan's future was more valuable than someone else's entire life. Had made that call without telling him, without asking him, without ever once believing Ethan might have chosen differently. The worst part, the part Ethan couldn't fully look at yet, was that he didn't know for certain that his father had been wrong about that. He told Helena that evening. Not everything. A version. An old relationship, before her, that had consequences he hadn't known about. A woman who had been pressured out of the picture. A child raised somewhere else. He watched Helena as he said it. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, she said, "I'm sorry. That must be painful to sit with." The words were right. The tone was right. Helena had always had an excellent sense of what the right response was. But there was something underneath the response, a quality to her stillness, a particular absence of surprise, that registered somewhere in Ethan without quite forming into a thought. He was too tired. He had been carrying too much for too many days. He set the observation aside. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He let her. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "The boy has a life. She built something. I'm not going to walk into it." Helena nodded once. It was the nod of someone who had heard exactly what they expected to hear. The next morning, Ethan called Victor. "Close the file," he said. "I have what I need." "Understood," Victor said. "Then, before I stop, there's one thing I should mention." Ethan waited. "Marcus Webb," Victor said. "I tracked his movements as part of the background work. The past 11 years. A pause. He's never visited the boy. Not once. Not a birthday, not a school event, nothing. I cross-checked it 6 different ways." Ethan didn't respond. A man who lists himself as an emergency contact usually does it because he intends to show up, Victor said. Marcus has never shown up. Not once in 11 years. The line stayed open for a moment. Then Ethan said, "Send me what you have," and hung up. He sat at his desk with Victor's last message open on his phone and tried to make it fit inside the story Marcus had told him. A father who had stepped up to protect his child. Who had used his own resources to build a new life for the woman carrying that child. Who had inserted himself as the safety net, the one name on the emergency contact form, the one person the school would call if something went wrong. A father who had never once visited in 11 years. And a woman who had driven 3 hours in the dark to leave a blanket at Ethan's door. Not Marcus's door. Ethan's. He thought about that. The specific geography of it. 3 hours in one direction to reach Ethan's gate, when Marcus lived 40 minutes away. When Marcus was supposedly the child's father. When Marcus was supposedly the one who had built this entire arrangement to protect them both. If any of that were true, why had she come to him? Why had she always been coming to him? Everything Marcus said made sense, until it didn't. If you felt that shift, you're paying attention. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us what you think is really going on. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the answer is closer than Ethan thinks, and it changes everything. Ethan reopened Victor's file at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, 3 days after he had closed it. He hadn't planned to. He'd told himself he was done, that Marcus had given him enough truth to grieve and move on from, that the child had a life, that some doors were better left shut. He had almost convinced himself. Then he sat at his desk and looked at the closed drawer and thought about a woman driving 3 hours to a gate that wasn't Marcus's. He called Victor. "I need one more thing," he said. "Don't look for Claire Ashford. Look for Kara. Her original identity. Everything before 13 years ago." Victor was quiet for a moment. "That's a different search." "I know. It'll take a few days." "I know that too." He hung up and went to bed and did not sleep. Victor called back in 36 hours. He didn't open with it carefully. He said, "Claire Ashford is Kara." Ethan heard it and said nothing. "Same person," Victor said. "Different name, different hair, different city, different professional history, but the biometrics match. I ran her against old photographs from 12 years ago. The facial structure is the same. She didn't vanish, Ethan. She was rebuilt. Someone gave her an entirely new identity and placed her 3 hours away from you. 3 hours. Not across the country. Not abroad. 3 hours. Close enough to reach in a single night." Ethan sat with that geography and what it meant, that for 11 years, Kara had been right there, in the same weather, under the same sky, 3 hours in any direction from the life he had built without her. "Who paid for it?" Ethan asked. Victor sent the financial trail while they were still on the phone. Ethan opened it and started reading, and about a third of the way through the document he stopped. The cost of the identity construction, legal fees, relocation, new documentation, the nursing credentials, all of it, traced back through 2 intermediary accounts to a shell company. And the shell company connected to Caldwell Holdings. His own company. Someone had used his money to hide her. He pulled internal financial records himself. He still had access to the archived systems from the company's early years, something he had never bothered to restrict because it had never occurred to him that he would need to. He found the shell account transfer in under an hour. 12 years old. Small enough to disappear inside a larger quarter. The kind of line item that only means something if you know what you're looking for. The authorization signature was one name. Helena Marsh. Not Helena Caldwell. Helena Marsh, the name she had used before they married. Her professional name from the years she had worked as his father's executive assistant. Ethan read that twice. Then he sat very still in his chair. His father's executive assistant. He had met Helena at a conference in London 2 years after Kara disappeared. She had been there independently, or so he had believed. They had spoken at a reception and she had been sharp and composed and completely at ease with his world, and he had thought at the time that it was remarkable how naturally she fit. It wasn't remarkable. It made perfect sense. Because she had spent 2 years learning exactly how he worked, what he valued, what he needed, and what his father wanted him to have in a wife, before she ever walked into that room. She hadn't found him at that conference. She had been placed there. He didn't go home that night. He drove 3 hours south, through dark highways that thinned into 2-lane coastal roads, until the city noise disappeared completely and it was just him and the headlights and the quiet hum of a car that cost more than most people's houses, carrying a man who understood for the first time that his entire adult life had been arranged around him like furniture while he stood in the middle of it thinking he had chosen it all himself. He parked on the street outside a small house with a porch light on. He didn't get out of the car. He sat there. Watched the windows. Warm light in one room downstairs. A television flickering somewhere. The ordinary quiet of a house where people lived. He didn't know what he would say if he walked to that door. He didn't know if he had the right to walk to it at all. Then the front door opened. A boy stepped out onto the porch. Young, 11, maybe, slight in the way kids are before they grow into themselves. He trotted down the porch steps and went to the mailbox at the end of the path, pulled out a small stack of envelopes, and stood there flipping through them the way kids do when they've been asked to do something and want to feel useful about it. Ethan couldn't see his face in the dark. The porch light didn't reach that far. But the boy was wearing a sweater. Yellow. Soft-looking. The same particular shade as a blanket that had been sitting in Ethan's desk drawer for the past 2 weeks. The boy closed the mailbox, turned, and went back inside. The door shut. The light in the downstairs window stayed warm and steady. Ethan sat in his car on a dark street and understood that he had been parked outside the wrong life for 12 years, the one that had been built for him, piece by piece, by people who had decided what he was allowed to know. He picked up his phone. Found the number Victor had traced for Claire Ashford. For Kara. He called it before he could think about it any further. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. She picked up. Silence first. Long enough that he thought she might hang up. Then her voice, older, quieter, but unmistakably hers. The voice he had heard in his memory 100 times and pushed away every single time. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me," she said. A pause. "But you found the wrong door first, didn't you?" She's been waiting. She knew he would come, she just didn't know how lost he would get on the way. If you need to talk about that yellow sweater, the comments are right there. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what Kara says next will rewrite everything you thought you understood. They met at a small cafe in the coastal town. Kara's choice. Neutral ground, but on her terms, 10 minutes from her house, a place where the staff knew her name and she knew every exit. Ethan arrived first. He sat facing the door. When she walked in, he understood immediately why he hadn't recognized her from Victor's grocery store photograph. It wasn't just the hair or the name or the years. It was the way she carried herself. Kara had always moved like someone with somewhere urgent to be. This woman moved like someone who had decided, a long time ago, that stillness was safer. She sat down across from him without a greeting. Set her bag on the chair beside her. Folded her hands on the table. No warmth. But no anger either. Just distance, the kind that isn't built in a day, that gets constructed slowly, carefully, one disappointment at a time until it's solid enough to live behind. "You look the same," she said. It wasn't a compliment. "You don't," he said. She accepted that without reaction. "No. I don't." She told him about Helena without him having to ask. About a woman who had appeared at her door 12 years ago, polished, professional, certain. Who had told her, calmly and without cruelty, that Ethan had asked her to come. That he wanted this handled quietly. That Kara deserved better than being someone's loose end, and that there was money available to help her start somewhere new, and that the kindest thing for everyone would be if she took it. Ethan sat very still. "She said you authorized it," Kara said. Those exact words. That you had authorized her removal. She paused. "She meant me. In case there was any confusion." "I didn't." "I know." Kara's voice was even. "I know that now. But I didn't know it then. And here's the thing, Ethan." She looked at him directly for the first time since she'd sat down. "I believed her. Not because she was convincing. Because you had already chosen the company over me once. She just handed me an explanation that fit what I already knew about you." That landed exactly as hard as it was meant to. He didn't defend himself. There was nothing to say that would change what it had felt like to be her, standing at a door, being handed a version of Ethan that was almost true enough. She told him the rest without him asking for any of it. His father. Helena. The timeline of how they had worked together, identifying Kara as a complication, watching for the right moment, finding it during a 6-week acquisition push when Ethan was barely sleeping and answering emails at 2 in the morning and wouldn't have noticed if the sky changed color. They had used his focus as a door. Walked right through it while he wasn't looking. They didn't think of themselves as villains, Kara said. "I want you to understand that. Your father thought he was protecting you. Helena thought she was positioning herself for a life she wanted. People rarely do terrible things while believing they're terrible people." Ethan looked at her. "That's very generous." "It's not generous. It's just true." She looked at her hands. "Generous would be forgiving them. I haven't done that." Then she asked her question. She didn't build up to it. She just asked it, quietly, the way someone asks something they've been holding for a very long time. "If none of this had happened. If I had stayed. What would you have chosen?" The cafe hummed around them. Someone at the counter ordered something. The door opened and let in a brief rush of sea air and then closed again. Ethan opened his mouth. And then he didn't say anything. Not because he didn't have an answer. Because he did have one, somewhere, and he was afraid of what it was. The honest version of himself, the one that existed before the money, before the image, before 12 years of building something so large it had become the only thing he knew how to be, that version had an answer. He wasn't sure it was the right one. Kara watched him not answer for about 4 seconds. Then she nodded. Once. Slowly. Okay, she said. Like she had confirmed something she had already known. Ethan felt that nod in a place that had nothing to do with any of this mystery, any of the financial records, any of the investigations. It landed in the place where a 28-year-old man had once looked at a woman who loved him and picked up his phone to answer a work call instead. What's his name? Ethan asked. Kara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Cole. Ethan thought of the blanket. The embroidered letter in the corner. The sea he had stared at for 2 weeks, turning it over, looking for what it meant. The blanket, he said. The C isn't for Cole. She said it simply. It stands for something else. He waited. She shook her head. Not yet. There was one more wall between him and the complete truth, and she was standing in front of it, and she wasn't moving until she was ready. I'll tell you everything, she said. But first you need to talk to your father. Not to confront him. To actually listen to him. She met his eyes. Because there are things I can't tell you until you've heard what he was afraid of. And you need to hear it from him, not from me. Ethan drove to his father's house that same evening. He had expected defensiveness. Denials, or the tight silence his father used when he didn't want to engage. What he got instead was a man sitting in a chair by a window, unhurried, who looked at him when he walked in and said nothing for a long moment. Then his father said, I didn't do this to hurt you. Ethan said nothing. I did it because she was going to tell you something. Something she had found out, about the company. About where the first investment money actually came from. His father's voice was steady. Almost gentle. It would have destroyed you. Everything you'd built. Everything you were about to build. And she was going to tell you at the worst possible moment. The room went quiet. Ethan looked at the man who had raised him, shaped him, protected him in every way he knew how, and felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with anger. What had Kara found out? What was so dangerous that the only solution was to make her disappear? 12 years of silence, and the real secret was never about the child. Tell us in the comments, did you see this coming? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what Kara discovered about that first investment is going to change the entire story. Kara called him the morning after he spoke to his father. No greeting. Just, come back. I'll tell you the rest. He drove the 3 hours without music. Without calls. Just road and light and the particular silence of someone who knows they are about to learn something they cannot unlearn. She was waiting on the porch when he arrived. 2 coffees on the railing. She handed him one when he reached the steps. He noticed she remembered how he took it. He didn't say anything about that. They sat in chairs at opposite ends of the porch and she started talking. 12 years ago, Kara had been spending time with her father, an accountant, careful and quiet, the kind of man who noticed things in numbers that other people missed. He had been approached to review a secondary set of financials connected to Caldwell Holdings' first major investor. What he found, he showed to Kara. The seed funding, the money that had launched Ethan's company, the investment that had made everything possible, had been laundered. Moved through a criminal enterprise before it reached Ethan's books. The investor had used Caldwell Holdings as a clean vehicle. Ethan hadn't known. But his name was on everything. My father didn't know what to do with it, Kara said. He was scared. So he showed me. And I decided I was going to tell you. She had planned to do it that week. The week of the Halloran Grand. The week she had waited in the lobby 3 nights in a row because she didn't want to say it over the phone. She never got the chance. Helena arrived at my door before I could tell you, Kara said. 2 days before I was going to sit down with you and put the documents on the table. She said you had sent her. She paused. And I believed it. Because it fit. Ethan set down his coffee. It fit because his father had found out first. Because his father had done what he had always done, identified the threat, moved quietly, eliminated the problem before Ethan ever knew it existed. He had reached Kara's door before she could reach Ethan's. And Kara, who had already given Ethan one chance and watched him choose his company, had looked at Helena standing there with a convincing lie and decided she recognized the pattern. So she took the money. Took the new name. Took herself 3 hours away. And carried everything she knew with her. Cole is yours, Kara said. She said it the way she said everything, directly, without cushioning. Like she had decided a long time ago that she owed him the truth without ceremony. Ethan didn't speak. I found out I was pregnant after Helena came. After I had already agreed to go. She looked out at the yard. I didn't tell you because I thought you had sent her. I thought you had looked at the situation, a woman who knew something dangerous, who was already complicated, who you had already chosen against once, and you had made a decision. Kara. I'm not saying it was right. Her voice stayed even. I'm saying it was what I believed. And once you believe something like that about someone, you build around it. You protect your child around it. She turned to look at him. He grew up without a father because I spent 11 years being certain you had chosen that. The weight of it was enormous. Not clean. Not simple. No single villain, no single moment where everything went wrong. His father, protecting him from a crime he didn't know about. Helena, doing the work his father couldn't do himself. Kara, believing a lie that was just true enough. Ethan, focused on an acquisition while the people around him moved pieces he couldn't see. And a boy, growing up in a house 3 hours away, checking the mailbox in a yellow sweater, asking questions his mother built walls fast enough to answer. The blanket, Ethan said. Kara nodded. The C in the corner. Cole, she said. Just his initial. Just one thread. I needed to leave something that belonged to him without forcing anything. She was quiet for a moment. I wanted you to choose to look. I didn't want to hand it to you. I needed to know if you would look on your own. Ethan thought about the morning Dara had brought it in. The way he had almost not picked it up. The drawer he had opened and closed and opened again. The photograph he had almost missed inside the hem. He had almost not looked. He had come so close to burying it the way he had buried everything else. And then something in him, something he still couldn't name, had put the blanket in the drawer instead of the trash. He heard Lily's voice in his memory without warning. Clear as if she were on the porch beside him. It smells like someone sad. 7 years old, holding a blanket that belonged to a boy she had never met, and she had felt the weight of it in 4 words. She had named the whole story before anyone had told her a single word of it. Ethan pressed his hand over his mouth for a moment. Every small wound from the past 2 weeks arrived at once. The photograph with the face cut away. The license plate he couldn't quite place. Marcus's voice on the phone, afraid. Helena's face recovering too quickly at the top of the stairs. Lily asking if he had a secret and telling him his secrets made him look scared. All of it was always this. A boy named Cole. A woman who had protected him alone for 11 years because she believed the alternative was a man who had chosen to erase her. A truth that had been sitting 3 hours away, waiting to see if Ethan would finally look in the right direction. He looked at Kara. She looked back at him. No warmth, still. But something had shifted in the distance she carried. A single degree. Barely visible. The way light changes when a cloud moves. I have one question, he said. She waited. Why now? After 11 years, why did you leave the blanket now? Kara looked at him for a long moment. And the answer she gave him was not the one he was prepared for. Cole is his. The sea was always his name. And Lily smelled the sadness in that blanket before anyone told her a word. If this chapter broke something open in you, tell us in the comments. We're reading everything. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because Kara's answer to "why now" changes the entire meaning of this story. The answer was not what Ethan had expected. Kara didn't look away when she said it. She had stopped looking away from things a long time ago. Cole is sick, she said. Not critically. But seriously enough that the doctors need his full medical history. Both sides. She paused. I needed your family records. That was the practical reason I came. Ethan sat with that for a moment. All the investigations. All the sleepless nights. All the weeks of wondering who had left a blanket and why and what it meant, and at the center of it was a mother who needed medical paperwork for her son and didn't know how to ask the father who she believed had once paid someone to make her disappear. You could have written a letter, he said. Not accusing. Just saying. I know. She looked at her hands. I didn't want to need you. I've spent 11 years not needing you. It was the one thing I was good at. She was quiet for a moment. So I left something that didn't require me to ask. I left it and I drove home and I told myself that if you looked, you looked. And if you didn't, she stopped. I'd figure out another way. She had driven 3 hours in the dark at 4 in the morning because asking for help was harder than the drive. Ethan understood that in a way he wasn't fully prepared for. There was a second reason, Kara said. She said it carefully, like she'd decided to include it and wasn't entirely sure she should. Cole has been asking about his father. The words landed quietly. Not in a dramatic way. He's not angry about it. He just asks. Small things. Quiet things. He'll be doing homework and he'll say, "Did my dad like school?" And I'll answer something. And then 2 weeks later there'll be another one. She looked out toward the yard. He's 11. He's putting a picture together from pieces I give him. And I've been careful about the pieces. But he's smart, and the questions are getting more specific, and I can't build walls faster than he can ask questions anymore. Ethan said nothing. He was thinking about Lily, asking him if he had a secret. About the way children notice everything and name it without understanding the weight of what they're naming. Cole had been doing the same thing. Quietly. For years. Building a picture of a father from whatever pieces his mother was willing to hand him. He deserves a real answer, Kara said. Even if the real answer is complicated. She took him to meet Cole that afternoon. She didn't prepare Ethan with instructions. She just said, he knows a man is coming. He doesn't know who you are yet. Let him set the pace. Then she opened the front door and stepped aside. Cole was sitting at the kitchen table with a book open in front of him. He looked up when Ethan walked in. He was 11, slight, with the focused stillness of a kid who spent a lot of time inside his own head. He closed the book, not putting it away, just marking the pause, and stood up and walked over and put out his hand to shake. Ethan shook it. The formality of it was precise and careful, the handshake of a boy who had been told a stranger was coming and had decided in advance to be ready. But his eyes were doing something else. He was looking at Ethan the way you look at someone you've already formed an opinion about and are now checking against the reality. Whatever he was comparing, Ethan didn't know if he was passing. They sat at the kitchen table. Kara made something in the background. Cole asked Ethan what he did for work in the polite tone of a child who has been taught to make conversation. Ethan answered simply. Cole nodded. Asked one follow-up question. Listened to the answer. Then he was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "Did you know about me?" No setup. No warning. Just the question, delivered with the same directness he'd used for everything else, like he'd been holding it back for exactly long enough and had decided now was fine. Ethan looked at him. "No," he said. "I didn't know." Cole nodded once. The way you nod when you've received information you needed and are filing it away. Then he picked up his book and opened it again. That was it. The whole exchange. 30 seconds, maybe. No drama, no tears, no moment of connection that wrapped anything up cleanly. Just a boy who had asked the most important question of his life, gotten a one-word answer, and gone back to his book. Ethan drove home with that nod living somewhere in his chest where it was going to stay for a very long time. Helena was waiting when he got back. She wasn't surprised to see him. She was standing in the kitchen, arms folded, not as defense, more like she needed something to hold on to. She had known, Ethan realized. Probably since the morning Dara brought in the blanket and Helena had stood at the top of the stairs with that expression she'd recovered from too quickly. She'd been waiting 2 weeks for this conversation. "I'm not going to deny it," she said. "I made a decision I didn't have the right to make. I was 26 years old and your father trusted me to handle it and I told myself it was the right thing." She looked at him. "And then I built a life here, with you, and the life was real, Ethan. I need you to know that part was real." He believed her. That was the strange thing. He believed that Helena had loved him in the way she was capable of loving someone, carefully, strategically, but genuinely. That the marriage had been real even if the foundation had been built on someone else's removal. He also believed that none of that changed what she had done. He didn't say either of those things. He just looked at her and nodded, once, and went upstairs. He called Kara that evening. She picked up and he said, "Thank you. For today." A pause. Then, "He's going to have more questions." "I know," Ethan said. "I'll be there for them." Kara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There's one more thing you should know. About Marcus." Ethan waited. "He knew Cole was yours. From the beginning. He agreed to be the emergency contact not because he was protecting me. He did it because he didn't think you could handle the truth. He thought that if you ever found out, you'd choose the company again. He wanted to make sure someone was there for Cole in case you proved him right." The line was quiet. "Was he right?" Kara asked. It was the same question she'd asked in the cafe, the one Ethan hadn't answered. And here it was again, dressed differently, asking the same thing. Not who are you? Not what did you do? Who are you going to be? Marcus bet against Ethan. Cole asked one question and went back to his book. And somewhere in all of this, the story stopped being about a blanket and became about a choice. Tell us in the comments, do you think Ethan will show up? Subscribe and turn on notifications for the final chapter, because the ending of this story is the part that stays with you. Ethan called his lawyer on a Monday morning. Not about Helena. Not about his father. Not about the laundered investment that had been sitting in his company's foundation like a crack in a wall for 12 years. He made one call first. "I want to establish paternal rights," he said. "Not a custody claim. Not a legal challenge to the current arrangement. I want to be recognized as Cole's father, formally, legally, on paper, so that I can be present in his life with his mother's cooperation." His lawyer started to ask about strategy. Ethan cut him off. "This isn't a fight," he said. "Don't make it one." He had spent 12 years building things by force, by outmaneuvering, outworking, outspending. He had built an empire that way. He was not going to try to build a relationship with his son the same way. Cole was not an acquisition. He was a person who had already decided something about him, and the only way to change it was to show up and keep showing up until the showing up meant something. He told Kara that afternoon. She listened. She didn't thank him. She said, he has soccer practice on Thursdays and he reads before bed and he doesn't like when people make a big deal about things. Then she paused. Don't make a big deal about things. Ethan said he wouldn't. He meant it. He went back to see Cole the following Saturday. No gifts. He had thought about it, a book, something low-key, something that didn't feel like a bribe, and then he'd left the house with nothing in his hands because anything he brought would be about managing how the visit felt, and he was done managing things. Cole was in the backyard when Ethan arrived, bouncing a soccer ball off the side of the house in a steady, rhythmic way, not playing, just thinking. He stopped when he heard the gate and looked at Ethan without expression. Hey, Ethan said. Hey, Cole said. They sat on the back steps. Kara stayed inside, visible through the kitchen window but not watching, or pretending not to watch, which was its own act of trust. Ethan said, Is there anything you want to know? About me. About any of it. You can ask whatever you want. Cole considered this seriously. He picked up the soccer ball and turned it over in his hands. He was quiet long enough that Ethan thought maybe he'd said the wrong thing. Then Cole looked at him and asked, Do you like baseball? Ethan blinked. Not why did you leave? Not why didn't you look for me? Not any of the questions Ethan had spent days preparing answers for. Baseball. Yeah, Ethan said. I do. Cole nodded like this was useful information. My school has a game next Friday. It's not a big deal. But it's there if you wanted to come. He said it quickly, in the way kids say things they're trying to make sound casual. Then he went back to bouncing the ball against the wall. Ethan sat on those steps for another hour. They didn't talk about anything important. They talked about baseball and a video game Cole was stuck on and whether the coastal weather was better than city weather. Small things. Easy things. The kinds of things you talk about when you're trying to figure out if you can be in the same space as someone. When Ethan left, Cole lifted one hand from the doorway. Not quite a wave. Just an acknowledgement that the visit had happened. It was enough. Helena left on a Wednesday. Ethan didn't ask her to go. She didn't ask for permission. She had simply reached the end of whatever she had been maintaining and made a quiet decision the way she made all her decisions, efficiently, without drama, without leaving a mess for anyone else to clean up. She packed 2 suitcases. She arranged for the rest to be handled later. She said goodbye to Ethan in the hallway in a tone that was neither cold nor warm, the tone of someone who has accepted the distance and is choosing to be dignified inside it. Then she went to Lily's room. Ethan didn't follow her. He stood in the hallway and listened to the sound of Lily's door opening and a quiet conversation he couldn't make out, and then the sound of the door closing again. When Lily came out 20 minutes later, she was holding a folded piece of paper in both hands. She carried it carefully, like it was something that needed to be kept right. She didn't show it to Ethan. He didn't ask to see it. She just walked to her room, put it somewhere safe, and came back out and asked if they could have pancakes for dinner. He made pancakes. It was the most important meal he had cooked in years. He went to see his father the following week. He hadn't planned what to say. He had thought about it too many times to plan anymore, so he just drove over and sat down in the same chair across from the same man and let the quiet do some of the work. His father looked older. Not by much. But something in his face had shifted since their last conversation, like a structure that had been very certain of itself for a very long time and had recently discovered it wasn't as solid as it had believed. Ethan didn't say he forgave him. He didn't say he didn't. Forgiveness was a long road and he was only at the start of it and he wasn't going to say words that weren't true yet. What he said was, you should meet him. Cole. If he ever wants that. His father didn't answer immediately. The silence went on long enough that Ethan could feel the weight of it, the weight of a man sitting with the full cost of a decision he had made 12 years ago when he was certain he was doing the right thing. When he had been so sure that protecting Ethan from the truth was the same thing as protecting Ethan. His father nodded. Once. Small. It cost him something. Ethan could see that it did. And he didn't try to make it cost less. He and Kara did not go back to what they had been. That was never the conversation. What they had belonged to 2 people who no longer existed, a version of him who didn't know yet what he would choose when tested, and a version of her who still believed he might choose her. What they built instead was quieter and more honest than anything they'd had before. A schedule. A shared understanding of what Cole needed. A willingness to be in the same room without history turning it into something heavy. It was not romantic. It was not warm, not yet. But it was real, and it was built on the only thing that had ever been solid between them, the fact that they were both, in the end, trying to do right by the same person. The school game was on a Friday afternoon. Overcast, cool, the kind of day that smells like autumn coming. Ethan arrived 5 minutes before the first inning. He found a spot in the bleachers, not at the front, not next to Kara who was already there with a coffee and a jacket, but a few rows back. Present. Not presuming. Cole was on the field in a red cap, doing warm-up throws with a focused, careful look that Ethan recognized in a way he couldn't entirely explain and didn't try to. The game started. Ethan watched. Halfway through the third inning, Cole glanced back at the bleachers. Scanning. The kind of quick look that tries to seem accidental. He found Ethan. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He looked at him for about 2 seconds, long enough to confirm that Ethan was there, long enough to register it, and then he turned back to the game. Ethan stayed for every inning. The blanket was still in Cole's room at home, folded on his shelf. Kara had put it there years ago, not as a clue, not as evidence, but because it was the only thing she'd kept from the life she thought she was going to have. She had left a copy at Ethan's door. The original had never left Cole's room. Cole had grown up sleeping near it without knowing what it meant. Now, maybe, he would get to find out. He stayed for every inning. And sometimes that's what the whole story was really asking, not who the father was, but who was willing to stay. If this story meant something to you, tell us in the comments. And if you love stories about real human choices, subscribe and turn on notifications. We have more coming, and they stay with you.